Right. Good evening. Really nice to see you all. Many familiar faces since we started and prior to, but it's really exciting to see you all here. Dear students, distinguished faculty, colleagues, members of the great Boston community. I'm delighted that you're here in person and virtually. I'm Smitha Hanif, and I serve as the co-chair for Harvard Food Systems Initiative. Harvard Food Systems Initiative is our effort to build a common platform for our students, faculty, and staff to engage in and contribute to food systems. Our vision is for Harvard Food Systems Initiative to serve as a common place for knowledge exchange, community engagement, and convening. With faculty teaching courses, leading scientific research, students engaging in curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular activities, we have many built-in pathways to advance healthy diets from sustainable food systems. It is my hope that HFSI becomes the heartbeat for food systems work and serves as the epicenter for knowledge generation, knowledge exchange, community, and convening in our region and beyond. HFSI will bring you tools in the form of white papers, curated lists of videos, scientific publications, interviews, recipes, menus, and many more. Our session today is focused on eating for personal and planetary health. Through Harvard Food Systems Initiative, we envision bringing this to life every day for our campus. Today, I'm delighted that I am joined by Dr. Frank Hugh and Stacy Blondin on this topic. Dr. Frank Hugh is the chair of Department of Nutrition, Frederick J. Stair Professor of Nutrition and Epidemiology at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and Professor of Medicine, Harvard Medical School, and Brigham and Women's Hospital. Dr. Hugh's major research interests include epidemiology and prevention of cardiometabolic diseases through diet and lifestyle, gene-environment interactions, and transitions in low and middle income, nutrition transitions in low and middle income countries. He has served on editorial boards of The Lancet, Diabetes and Endocrinology, Diabetes Care, and Clinical Chemistry. Dr. Hugh was elected to the National Academy of Medicine in 2015. And we're really honored that you're here with us today and through our journey at HUDS as we think about healthy diets from regional food systems. Dr. Hugh, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Smitha, for your kind introduction, and also thank you and Dr. Water-Willett for co-leading the Harvard Food Systems Initiative. I think this is truly a milestone for the Harvard community and also, of course, for our students. Today, I'm going to talk about optimal nutrition for personal and planetary health. This is what I'm going to discuss today in the next 20 minutes or so. First, I will discuss the impact of what you eat on the health of the planet. And then I will discuss cutting-edge science behind health benefits of plant-rich eating patterns. And then I will talk about several common myths about plant protein, carbohydrates, and soy products. And then finally, I will spend a few minutes talking about plant-based and food technology alternatives to animal protein. Some of you may have seen the USDA's My Plate and also healthy eating plate from our department. There's some similarities between the two plates. As you can see that fruits and vegetables occupy half of the My Plate and also healthy eating plate. However, there are important distinctions between the two plates. For example, My Plate recommends milk and other dairy products for every meal, whereas healthy eating plate encourage water consumption and other healthy beverages. And also healthy eating plates emphasize whole grain consumption and healthy protein intake. On the other hand, My Plate does not distinguish different type of grain products and different type of proteins. I think these distinctions between different type of proteins, different type of grains are very important for both human health and the health of the planet. This is yet another plate. It's called precision nutrition plate or personalized nutrition plate. The idea of precision nutrition is that one size doesn't fit all. So diet recommendations need to be tailored to individual characteristics, such as your genetic background, your microbiome, and so forth. This is certainly a very exciting area for research. However, we're still in the early stage of precision nutrition research, and those technologies are not ready for prime time yet. So the question is whether a healthy diet for humans is also beneficial for the health of the planet. To address this question, Dr. Aviva Muscus in our department conducted a detailed analysis to look at health and the environmental impacts of plant-rich dietary patterns using data from one of our large cohort studies. This is Health Study 2. The quality of dietary pattern was quantified by using this index called Alternative Healthy Eating Index, or HEI. So the higher the score, the better the diet quality. As you can see here, as HEI increases, there is a parallel decline in both cardiovascular disease incidence and also in greenhouse gas emission. So it means that there is a strong correlation between health and the environmental impact of a healthy diet. This is a study published a couple of years ago, also looking at health and environmental impacts. In this study, the authors look at 15 different food groups. As you can see here, the x-axis shows the relative risks of 4 diseases: colorectal cancer, coronary heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. And the y-axis shows a composite measure of 5 environmental impact metrics. And as you can see that there is a strong correlation between health impact and the environmental impact of those food groups. And for example, red and processed meats, which have the largest environmental impacts, they also are strongly associated with increased risk of chronic diseases. On the other hand, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts, legumes, which have relatively low environmental impact, they are also associated with decreased risk of those chronic diseases. So it means that what is good for our health is also good for the health of the planet. However, there are some exceptions. For example, sugar-sweetened beverages, which have pretty low environmental impact, but higher consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages is associated with increased risk of chronic diseases. So which foods have the largest environmental footprint? Clearly is red meat, especially beef. As you can see here, the carbon footprint of beef production is many times higher than the production of other foods, including both animal proteins and plant foods. So why is this the case? Why the production of beef and other type of red meat has such high environmental impact? The main reason is that cows and other ruminant animals, when they consume fiber, the fiber is actually fermented by gut bacteria, and that produces large amounts of methane. And methane is a very potent global warming gas. Is many times more potent than CO2. You can actually calculate your diet's environmental impact by using this online footprint calculator. It takes only a couple of minutes for you to do that. You can find out whether you are consuming a high carbon or low carbon diet, and what's the best ways for you to reduce your carbon footprint by changing your dietary habits. So are all plant-based diets healthy? And this is certainly a very interesting research question. To address this question, we analyzed large cohort studies and concluded that not all plant-based diets are healthy. For example, we found that if you eat a plant-based diet rich in whole grains, fruits and vegetables, nuts, legumes, vegetable oils, coffee or tea, you would have reduced the risk of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease and premature death. On the other hand, for people who eat plant-based diets high in sugar-sweetened beverages, refined grains, potatoes, fries, sweets, and other highly processed foods, they actually have increased risk of chronic diseases and mortality. And this plant-based diet is actually worse than animal food-based diets in terms of chronic disease risk. So these findings underscore the quality of plant foods in our diet. How do healthy plant foods contribute to positive health outcomes? In other words, what are the biological mechanisms underlying the health benefits of plant foods? So one interesting perspective is that many healthy plant-based foods are actually plant seeds. For example, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, coffee beans, and cocoa beans, they're all plant seeds. And they are powerhouses of nutrients that are necessary for developing into complex plants. So they are rich in essential macronutrients such as essential fatty acids, amino acid, and complex carbohydrates, which are essential for growth. And they are packed with antioxidants, which protect DNA from oxidation. And they are also very high in polyphenols. Those polyphenols can actually fend off predators because polyphenols taste very bitter. So that's why they can fend off some of the predators who want to eat the seeds. And the combination of those macronutrients and polyphenols and other bioactive compounds can have a multitude of benefits on cardiometabolic health. For example, those nutrients, including minerals, antioxidant, vitamins, and polyphenols, have anti-inflammatory effects, antioxidatives, have effects to reduce oxidative stress and reduce blood pressure, improve insulin sensitivity, improve glucose control, and improve blood lipids. So that's why when we think about plant foods, we are not talking about just fats or carbohydrates. We're talking about a whole package, which is very nutrient dense. They are powerhouses of beneficial nutrients and the bioactive compounds. Recent advances in omics technologies, especially genomics and metabolomics, have opened very exciting new door for precision nutrition research. So the LCMS metabolomics technology can detect hundreds of small molecule metabolites in your blood samples or urine samples, and those metabolites can be used as objective biomarkers of food intake. Can be also used as to predict your future risk of developing chronic diseases. So in the recent study, we identified a metabolic signature of a healthy plant-based diet, and this signature is associated with reduced risk of type 2 diabetes, independent of body mass index and other diabetes risk factors. And it's interesting, this signature consists of metabolites that reflect intake of certain fruits and vegetables and coffee. And also some of the metabolites reflect your body's response to the consumption of those foods or beverages. Another biological mechanism through which plant foods promote cardiometabolic health is through modulation of your gut microbiome. So this is a study led by my colleague, Daniel Wang, and looking at the interactions between consuming a Mediterranean diet and gut microbiome and the risk of cardiometabolic diseases. And in this study, adherence to Mediterranean diet or eating high amount of plant-based foods can promote healthy gut microbiome. And also eating a variety of plant foods increases the diversity of gut microbiome. And there is an interplay between our diet and the gut microbiome to influence health outcomes. For example, if you eat a plant-rich diet, it can promote a healthy gut microbiome. And those healthy bacteria in turn can produce beneficial metabolites that are associated with decreased risk of cardiometabolic diseases. The strongest evidence to support the beneficial effects of traditional Mediterranean diet comes from this landmark study conducted in Spain. It's called the Planetary trial. And in this study, more than 7,000 participants were randomized to 3 groups: a control diet and a Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil, and a Mediterranean diet supplemented with mixed nuts. This is a huge study and lasted for about 5 years. So at the end of the study, the authors found that participants in the 2 intervention groups, Mediterranean diet with either extra virgin olive oils or mixed nuts, had 30% reduction in cardiovascular disease incidence compared to the control diet. So the results are really remarkable, considering that this is a dietary intervention, is not a drug trial. So we know that olive oil is the hallmark of a traditional Mediterranean diet. Olive oil is not just beneficial to human health, but also to the health of the planet. This is the oldest olive tree on the island of Crete in Greece. Can you guess how old this tree is? Hundreds? It's already there. 3,000, more than 3,000 years old. And this oldest olive tree still produces high quality olives and olive oil. So olive trees are truly a gift to humanity and also to the environment, because they contribute to the preservation of natural resources and the biodiversity. So olive oil and other plant-based foods, they all contain a high amount of this compound or classes of compounds called polyphenols. And there are many different types of polyphenols in plant foods. So different plants have different polyphenol profiles. For example, coffee has high amount of chlorogenic acid and other phenolic acid. Lentils and whole grains have a high amount of lignans, and red wine has a high amount of resveratrol. And then blueberries have a very high amount of anthocyanins, and soy products have high amount of isoflavones. And green tea has high amount of catechins and epicatechins. So all those polyphenols, despite the fact that they have different names, they all have antioxidant, anti-inflammatory effects, meaning that higher consumption of those polyphenols can have potential health benefits. This is a randomized clinical trial conducted by our collaborator in Israel, Dr. Aris Shai. And this study was published in American Journal of Clinical Nutrition recently. In these trials, about 300 participants were randomized to 3 groups: a control diet and a medium-high polyphenol diet, in which the usual diet was supplemented with 28 grams of walnuts. And then the subgroup is a high polyphenol diet with supplemented with walnuts, 3 to 4 cups per day of green tea, and also menkai shake. Menkai is a tiny green plant grow on the surface of water, which is, this plant has very high amount of polyphenols and also high amount of protein, omega-3, zinc, B12. So this is almost like a superfood. And this intervention lasted for 1.5 years. At the end of the intervention, they found that this high polyphenol diet supplemented with walnuts, green tea, and the menkai significantly attenuated age-related brain atrophy. So when we grow older, our brain structure will shrink, this can be measured or assessed by imaging technology like MRI. And during the intervention, this study found that this healthy plant-based diet, high polyphenol diet, can actually mitigate age-related brain atrophy. So it means that in the long run, this kind of diet may have the potential to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. One common myth is that plant protein is inferior to animal protein. So this is based on the notion that animal foods, such as eggs and milk, are considered as high quality proteins because those foods contain all essential amino acids. So those are so-called complete proteins. On the other hand, many plant-based protein sources do not have all essential amino acids, so they are called incomplete proteins. And so the question is whether this actually make a difference for health outcomes. In real life, this is actually not a problem because we consume mixed meals that contain a variety of plant foods, and those plant foods can complement with each other in terms of essential amino acid profiles. And also many studies have shown that substituting a plant protein for animal protein is associated with lower risk of chronic diseases such as type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So that's why the concept of protein quality is not the same as food quality. So protein quality is focused on amino acid composition, may not have anything to do with health outcomes. On the other hand, food quality is directly related to health outcomes. So that's why we shouldn't equate protein quality to food quality. Another myth is that all carbohydrates are bad. This is the rationale behind the popular ketogenic diet. This kind of diet is very high in fat. About 70–80% of calories in ketogenic diet comes from fat, and very small amount of carbohydrates. Of course, this notion is not supported by scientific evidence, because numerous studies have shown that they're bad carbohydrates, but they're also good carbohydrates. One of the good carbohydrates is whole grains, and we and many other groups have found that higher consumption of whole grains is actually beneficial for the prevention of chronic diseases and reducing the risk of premature death. And in this meta-analysis, we found that increasing consumption of whole grains is associated with reduction in all-cause mortality, CVD mortality, and cancer mortality in a dose-response fashion. Another myth is eating soy increase risk of cancer. However, this is not supported by the current evidence either. This is the most recent review on consumption of soy products and isoflavones and various health parameters. And this review concluded that higher consumption of soy or isoflavones does not increase estrogen levels, because estrogen is a risk factor for female breast cancer, and does not decrease testosterone level in men, and does not adversely affect thyroid function. So that's why we shouldn't consider soy products or isoflavones as endocrine disruptors. And also in studies conducted in Asian populations, such as in China or Japan, higher consumption of soy products is actually associated with decreased risk of breast cancer and heart disease. In recent years, plant-based meat alternatives such as Impossible Burgers or Beyond Meat have become very popular because those products mimic the texture and the taste of eating red meat. So the question is, can those products be part of a healthy and a sustainable diet? One concern is that many of those products are highly processed, and some of those products have high amount of sodium or even saturated fat. So far, only one small study has compared the health effects of eating plant-based meat alternatives versus eating red meat. This is a single-site randomized crossover trial. Only 36 participants were randomized to two groups, 2 servings per day of plant meat versus 2 servings per day of red meat for 8 weeks. And they found that when the participants switch from red meat to plant meat, there is a significant reduction in plasma concentrations of TMAO, which is a gut flora metabolite that has been associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease. And also, when people consume plant meat versus red meat, there is a significant reduction in LDL cholesterol and even body weight. So this study suggests that replacing red meat with plant meat may have beneficial effects on health outcomes. Of course, this is a small study, and much larger study, a longer-term study, need to be conducted to replicate those findings. But based on these results, can say that plant-based meat alternatives can be an option to replace red meat, at least for some people. But it doesn't mean those products are the best option, because we know that consuming minimally processed plant foods, as I mentioned earlier, have a wide range of health benefits. So besides plant-based meat alternatives, there are other alternative proteins, such as lab-grown meat, insect protein, algae protein, and fungal protein. And those alternative proteins, they all have pros and cons, and they can be part of the solution in terms of reducing the impact of food system on climate change. But they are not the best option. They are not substitutes for consuming minimally processed plant foods. So finally, I just want to emphasize the multiple dimensions of sustainable diets. First and foremost, sustainable diets need to be nutritionally adequate, safe, and healthy. And then they need to have low environmental impact. In the meantime, sustainable diets need to be accessible, economically fair, and affordable. And they should also be socially and culturally acceptable. So this means that besides environmental and healthy impact, we also need to consider social, cultural, and economical aspects of food sustainability. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Hugh. We'll move to Stacy Blondin now. Stacy Blondin is a behavioral science associate conducting field and online research, applying behavior change approaches to encourage consumers to shift towards more sustainable diets. She is managing a series of randomized controlled trials, both online and in the field, that aim to identify candidate approaches to shift consumer norms concerning food waste and to determine their effects on end consumer perceptions and behavior. Prior to joining WRI, I didn't mention that she's a senior associate at the World Resources Institute. Sorry about that. Prior to joining WRI, Stacy completed her doctoral degree at Tufts University's Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy in Food Policy and Applied Nutrition. She conducted her dissertation research on dietary sustainability within national school meal programs with a focus on food waste and plant-based meals. Most recently, Stacy completed a 3-year postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard Chan School of Public Health, where she led several consumer behavior interventions to reduce the environmental impact of campus food operations in the United States. On a personal note, while Stacy was at Harvard, she was a dear friend to many of my colleagues at HUDS, working with our team to broaden their understanding of the impact of food choices on personal and planetary health. We are excited, Stacy, that you're here with us today. Over to you.
All right, thank you for that very warm welcome and introduction. After 2.5 years of being away from Harvard, it's wonderful to be with you all this evening and to have the pleasure of joining you and following on the heels of Dr. Hugh, who reminded me of the many motivations behind shifting to more plant-rich diets. And so my side of the presentation tonight will focus on more of the how, so how we get people to adopt plant-rich diets. Obviously, there are lots of reasons from a health and environmental standpoint, as well as some of the broader societal reasons that Dr. Hugh presented there at the end to both shift ourselves toward plant-rich diets as well as the population. So with that, I'll launch, and I want to leave time for questions, so I'll try to keep it to about 10 or 15 minutes. So first, I know many of you in the audience, I'm probably preaching to the choir a bit because you're here. Let me see if I can, okay. So when it comes to adopting plant-based or plant-rich diets for ourselves, obviously it's first important to identify why we want to make this change in our lives. And if Frank or Dr. Hugh didn't give enough motivation by having your brain shrink, I hope you might be able to come up with some of your own. And while health is consistently ranked among the top motivations for all of our dietary choices, whether plant-based or otherwise, obviously there are other factors that go into consideration, like cost and price and convenience, animal welfare, human welfare. So take your pick. By and large, plant-based diets tend to have multiple benefits on all of those fronts. So whatever your motivation is, remember it and stick to it. And then set a goal for yourself. And this might be, I want to go 100% plant-based tomorrow. Or it might be, I want to replace meat in one of my meals each week with a plant-based alternative. You know, a lot of times people recommend small steps to achieving whatever goal you might have, but for others, going cold turkey may be a more success, or cold turkey, I guess that's a bit of a, let's say cold beans, might be a more successful strategy. And then, yeah, identifying your priorities. So is it, when you're thinking about dietary choices, is it taste, cost, convenience? What do you want to prioritize when it comes to the food on your plate? And I know a lot of us students and otherwise are kind of rushed for time. And also taste is important. So we're kind of like, you know, what can I get on my plate as fast as possible? That's also healthy and good for the environment. And then enable your efforts. So a lot of us, including myself, grew up eating a lot of meat. I'm from the Midwest, so it was always kind of a meat, potatoes, and rice sort of plate. And I had to learn a lot about how to prepare plant-based foods, what some of them were when I got to HUDS as an undergrad, just exploring all different kinds of new foods. And that's part of the last two bullets, which are focused on taste. Don't force yourself to eat something you don't like. There's so many wonderful plant-based options out there. Like Frank said, it might not be the best for your health to steer in the direction of processed plant-based alternatives, but there's just tons of different legumes and grains out there that are totally fun and new to explore. And that's the last bullet, which is have fun. Food is good and it's fun to share with other people. So indulge and enjoy your plant-based foods. So I'm going to turn a little bit to focus on the work that I've been doing at WRI over the past couple of years. As a behavioral research associate on the food program, our goal is really to shift the population toward plant-based diets. So in 2019, we published the first edition of a playbook for guiding diners toward plant-rich dishes in food service. And the audience for the playbook is really all kinds of food service providers, from institutions like colleges and universities, to businesses and corporations, to kind of home eating and grocery store purchasing. This playbook has been widely used by industry. It's informed behavior change plans of more than 65 companies who are enrolled in our Cool Food program, aimed at reducing the greenhouse gas emissions associated with institutional food purchases, of which Harvard is a member. I'm very proud of that fact. I think one of the first members, in fact. And we're currently influencing the sales of more than 3 billion meals per year globally. So the playbook identified 5 areas of behavior change, which were the original 5 were placement, which involves changing the way food is displayed. And this could be in a cafeteria, a grocery store, a restaurant, a cafe, etc. Promotion, which is how plant-based meals are marketed and communicated to consumers. Presentation, which involves redesigning the actual menus, and this would be specific to a restaurant or perhaps a college or university menu-based dining selection area. And then product, which is modifying the food itself, so the way it's prepared. This might be like blended burgers or reducing the amount of meat that's in a dish or replacing the meat with beans or another plant-based protein. And then people, which is actually engaging staff members. And this could be the culinary staff or service staff in a restaurant to both kind of instill confidence or capability of preparing plant-based dishes and or promoting plant-based dishes to customers. And then we are in the process of updating the playbook 3 years after the original publication came out. And the methods behind the playbook are doing a literature review of all existing strategies to shift consumers toward plant-based options. And so we added a new P, which we're excited to share, and that's price. And that's quite literally modifying the cost of plant-based dishes relative to meat-based dishes. And Harvard has done quite a lot of this, like at Sebastian's and in the dining halls, students don't pay for food, but so Harvard's definitely a leader in that space. And so these strategies can all be used to shift consumers toward plant-based diets. And I won't have time to go into all of them in detail, but I would encourage you to download the playbook if you're interested on the WRI website. So this is a little bit more behind the methodology. We did a systematic review of behavior change strategies published since the year 2000. And then we ranked them in terms, feasibility and impact. And this was done through a survey of industry representatives from a variety of sectors. And so we identified each of these 6 strategies in terms of their feasibility and impact. And in the upper right quadrant are the top 17 most impactful and feasible or scalable strategies for shifting consumers. And so I'm not, again, going to have time to go into detail on these because I want to save time for questions. But among the most successful strategies, our presentation product had the most number of strategies, and those were things like reducing the amount of meat in the dish while increasing the amount of plant-based ingredients, improving the flavor and texture of plant-rich dishes, improving the appearance of plant-rich dishes, developing new or improving existing accompaniments to plant-rich dishes, so side dishes, introducing direct plant-rich alternatives to popular meat-based dishes, increasing the variety of different plant-rich dishes on offer, and increasing the ratio of plant-rich to meat-based dishes available. And then we had placement, which is all about the way food is put out in the servery or the menu. Price, so that was the new P, and that was like running cross-product promotions. So, get the plant-rich burger and you'll get a side for free. And then like kind of buy one, get one free offers and discounts on plant-based dishes. So I think that's all I'm going to have time to go into detail on. But I would encourage you to take a look at our existing playbook and then keep an eye out. The new edition will likely come out in early 2023. So whoever, if you play a role in food service or you're a diner and kind of want to scope out some of these strategies, that's where you could find that. And then finally, I just want to mention some work we did. So that was all review of existing literature. This here is original research we did an online test of different messages around climate change and health. So these are fictitious menus or hypothetical menus, and you can see there are 6 different menu options, and across the top here, there's a message. These are the top 2 messages in terms of performance out of an original 10. So both of these messages more than or nearly doubled the number of plant-based dishes that were selected from the menu. The most successful one is actually on the bottom. It says each of us can make a positive difference to the planet. Swapping just one meat dish for a plant-based one saves greenhouse gas emissions that are equivalent to the energy used to charge your phone for 2 years. Your small change can make a big difference. And then the runner-up was 90% of Americans are making the change to eat less meat, join this growing movement, and choose plant-based dishes that have less impact on the climate and are kinder to the planet. So we're looking to test these messages out in real world settings, along with some other behavior change nudge strategies based in behavioral economics. So I'll stop there and leave room for questions, but definitely an exciting field in terms of shifting behavior.
All right. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Dr.
Thanks.
Q, for engaging in such a wonderful discussion. I'm going to open it up for Q&A. I'll take questions from audience that are here with us. And Gwen, if you can tee us up. We have 10 minutes, so I think we should be able to take a few questions.
Yeah, super. I think Krista has the microphone.
Corey has the first question.
Hey, I'm just wondering, Dr. Hu, if you could speak more about the individual components about that personalized the one that you're working on. I forget what it's called, but the subsequent one for the plate. Vegan diet, and I'm interested about food behaviors, the kind of holistic view that you had in it, and just specifying what are the factors.
So you're talking about the precision nutrition or personalized nutrition plate. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the idea behind personalized nutrition or precision nutrition is not new. We know that one size doesn't fit all. And what has changed in the past 10, 15 years is just new technology that allow us to do genetic analysis, genetic testing, or even microbiome testing in a more affordable way. So now many companies are offering nutrient genomics testing, basically testing your genes, and then the companies offer meals or meal plans according to your genetic variants. And many startups are also testing your microbiome, and then develop an app for you that tailored to your microbiome composition. So those are very interesting developments. But at this point, there is very little evidence that either nutrient genomics testing or microbiome testing are effective in terms of changing individuals' behaviors or health outcomes. Right now, several companies are using computer algorithms, like machine learning algorithms, to prescribe AI diets, artificial intelligence diets. And again, those are exciting developments, but the evidence is still quite limited. I think those products outpace the scientific evidence at this point. But in 5 or 10 years, who knows? I think those kind of technologies may play a role in terms of improving individuals' eating behaviors or health outcomes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the next question. Do you have it? Yes.
This is for Dr. Gould. You mentioned you showed us the PREDIMED, the study on the Mediterranean diet. Have there been any other studies on diets from other regions of the world that sort of show something similar with respect to cardiovascular health?
But that's a really good question. So I guess the question is whether the Mediterranean diet can be adapted to other cultures and other populations. There are smaller studies, much smaller studies conducted in other parts of the world, in Asia, in Latin America, but those studies are much smaller, and also there need to be a lot of adaptations because some of the characteristics of traditional Mediterranean diet are not applicable to some other cultures or populations. For example, olive oil is a hallmark of traditional Mediterranean diet. And in a PREDIMED trial, the participants consume 3 to 4 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil per day, which is impossible in Asian populations or even in the US populations. So the question is how to adapt this kind of healthy eating components to other populations. And this has been done, but in a much smaller scale. I think much larger studies and long-term studies should be conducted to adopt healthy eating patterns in other cultures, other populations. That's why in my last slide, I talk about several different dimensions of sustainable diet. It has to be culturally and socially acceptable to conform to the social, cultural, and even religious standards of the populations.
Was that the question, Alan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there questions in the chat? We should.
No, just one about a source.
Okay.
Question.
Yep. Other questions in the room?
This question is for Stacy. So I believe you're a behavioral scientist. Is that what? Yeah. As a behavioral scientist, have you done any like research on individuals, such as like what you can do or what sort of measures you can do towards yourself to eat a more plant-based diet?
I think I heard the question. I think it was how do we study how individuals can change their behavior
So
towards
the question, yeah, it was since you're a behavioral scientist, if we as individuals would like to nudge ourselves towards plant-forward, plant-based diets, are there suggestions? Did I capture that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you. So yeah, I think I went over in the beginning of the presentation, just identifying motivation and kind of identifying also a strategy for how you want to stick to your plant-based goals once you set them. And this, can be difficult in our food environment where hamburgers are much cheaper oftentimes than salads and much more filling. So, thinking about how you're going to overcome barriers and also finding social settings and social friends, I guess, who are also like-minded in terms of eating plants makes sticking to a particular diet much easier. But nowadays, fortunately, plant-based options are much more readily available and affordable than they were even 5 or 10 years ago. So it's definitely working in your favor. And there are even more products coming out on the market, but definitely thinking about the why and the how, and then making sure you're equipped to, cook or find the foods that you want to eat.
Thank you, Stacy. that, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Dr. Hughes, special thank you for sharing your insights and research. Stacy, thank you for joining us from DC. Looking forward to continued partnership with you, and hopefully we, get to partner on the playbook that you mentioned. I'm like excited on the first two parts, right? Presentation and what was the other P? The presentation and product, I believe, right? The two Ps. So hopefully, as our chefs are innovating against these plant-based, healthy, sustainable diets, it'd be cool to get back in touch. And to everybody who's joining us here, hope to continue the conversations with you. Really excited to be engaging with you in this work. Stay in touch with us, hfsi.harvard.edu. Have a nice evening. Be well, be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.